If you're a real estate investor who's kind of struggling to get traction, these are some tips that I really wish I had learned sooner in my investing career, that even if you have just a few takeaways from today, I think it's really going to be sort of a mindset shift for you and change the trajectory of your investing career. I started investing in real estate in 2006, and to be honest, in the beginning, it was a real struggle. It was a challenge for many years, and I kind of felt like I was working for my real estate instead of the real estate working for me. I was putting in so much time and effort and money, and I wasn't really seeing any return as a result. And it wasn't until about 7-8 years ago that things really shifted, and it was kind of when we adopted the current strategy that we have now that I've had some realizations around this that have helped us feel like all of a sudden now our real estate is working for us and it's providing us the lifestyle that we actually were after. So in no particular order, I just want to share some ideas, thoughts, realizations that I've had that helped me go from struggling real estate investor to being able to have sort of a lifestyle by design, all because of the real estate investments that we own. So right off the bat, number one is, if your goal is financial freedom, then cash flow trumps appreciation all day long. So back when I was working full time and I was kind of struggling with real estate investing, I would get caught up in trying to buy properties that I could create a bunch of equity in. Maybe it was doing the BRRRR model or buying in an area that I thought was going to appreciate. But what I realized over time is that appreciation is speculative and it will happen pretty much everywhere. You know, properties are going to go up in value, but if you want to get to freedom today or in the near future, then what you really need is cash flow. And so once we discovered the strategy that we do now of buying really inexpensive or budget-friendly or low-cost short-term rentals, especially multi-unit short-term rentals, that cash flow phenomenally well, several $1,000s a month per property, it only took us about 8 properties, and it replaced both of our 9-to-5 jobs, and we were able to leave our full-time job, as opposed to I was spending many years accumulating these properties that had equity in them, and so my net worth was going up, but I was nowhere closer to being able to leave my 9-to-5. The second lesson I'll do with my helper here is that this will not be a straight line to success. So I was just interviewing a friend of mine, Bill Powers, on my podcast. You want to get down? All right. See ya. Thanks for helping out. So I was just interviewing a friend of mine, Bill Powers, on my podcast, and he is a really successful rental property investor on the north side of Chicago. I think he's got around 250 rental properties, and I think like 75 of them are short-term, and then the rest are long-term rentals. And he started 12, 13 years ago, and he was sharing how many mistakes he's made along the way. And he even on his website, he's highlighted his mistake deals, you know, the ones that were a disaster along the way. And it's a handful of them, but he's also done 250. So he's in a very, very good place financially at this point, but he made some big mistakes along the way. And almost every single person that I know who's had a significant amount of success, that's the case for. There's nobody that doesn't make mistakes. So you're going to have deals that come across your plate. Now, I have deals all the time where I think it's going to be a grand slam deal, and then it doesn't necessarily turn out that way. And then others where I'm like, should I even do this deal? It's kind of borderline, and then it's a great deal. So there's always risk involved in every deal. And I think what the problem is for most people is that they're trying to find that grand slam deal that doesn't have any risk. And so they never do a deal. And so a guy like Bill Powers just takes action. He looks at the fundamentals. He learns from every deal. He gets better over time, but it's a constant progression. And the only way to do that is to make mistakes along the way. Lesson number 3 is that the sexiest vacation rentals often don't produce the most cash flow, which I know feels counterintuitive, but a lot of people will get caught up in trying to buy these properties that are the highest end, that they think the most people will want to vacation at, with all the amenities. And then when they compare the expense of that, because they're typically paying a premium for those, to the income, there's often just not any left over, no cash flow left over at the end of the day. So they put all this money into something that's literally not getting them any closer to financial freedom, whereas at the same time, they could have bought something way less expensive, typically a multi-unit, that you're going to get much higher ROI on. So for every dollar you invest into that, the overall income might be a little bit lower, but your cost basis is so much lower, and you have multiple streams of income coming in, so the cash flow is off the charts. The next lesson that I highly recommend is to make sure that your short-term rental investment also works really well as a long-term rental. So back in 2000, when the whole COVID shutdown happened, I had several friends and colleagues and other investors that I knew that went bankrupt and lost everything pretty much overnight because they owned or they managed a bunch of short-term rentals that there was no backup plan for. So they couldn't convert them to long-term rentals. And nobody knew that short-term rentals were going to come screaming back. All we saw was that every single booking was wiped off the calendar and there was zero income coming in overnight, and they had no options because if they converted them to long-term rentals, they would hemorrhage thousands of dollars per property on a monthly basis, and nobody was buying these properties at the time either. I also had friends at the time who owned short-term rentals that also cash flowed if they used them as long-term rentals. So in the meantime, they converted them right away to long-term rentals and they still made some cash flow, and then several months later, once they realized things stabilized with short-term rentals and there was demand again, then they could convert them back and their business was okay, and they lasted through that time period. So all that to say is, if your investing strategy depends on the market never changing, then I think you could find yourself in a lot of trouble at some point. You should read that book, Who Moved My Cheese? It's a great one and it applies directly to this scenario. The next lesson, and I know this could be controversial, but it's not to use short-term rental property managers. And I'm not saying all short-term rental property managers are bad, and I know there's lots of reasons why people think they need a short-term rental property manager. But if you look at the price point of the average short-term rental property manager, it's somewhere between 20 and 30%. So on average, it's around 25% of your gross revenue right off the top. And I would argue that you could do all of the tasks, you could systematize all of the tasks that a short-term rental property manager does by putting a few key team members in place. This is what we've done. We've put a good cleaning team in place, a good handyman, and then eventually a guest services person, but you actually don't even need that in the beginning. You can handle the flow of communication with your guests pretty simply with one or two properties. And the amount of knowledge that you learn about your properties and about the process and just how to make your listings better and how to increase performance, I think is so invaluable by managing them yourself, especially in the beginning, because there's so much that you just don't know in the beginning. But you learn that in the beginning on a small scale when you have one or two properties, and then as you scale up, you can organically put a guest services person in place. And so you can take yourself out of the day-to-day for a tiny fraction of 25% of your gross revenue. Because once you get to a place where we're at today, where we have 33 listings, I look at what 25% of our revenue is on, especially in our busiest season, when we're bringing in over 6 figures a month. That's a lot of money, and we don't pay a fraction of that for our existing system. So if you can learn that on a small scale, then organically grow it with you, you can have the time freedom and you can also have the financial freedom, which you probably won't get to if you're giving away a quarter of your revenue right off the bat. The next lesson before I lose all of my natural light here is that risk does not correlate with leverage. Risk correlates with bad deals. So I would much rather own a property that's leveraged 100%, that cash flows several $1,000s a month, that works as a long-term rental and still cash flows as a long-term rental in a worst case scenario, and might even have a bit of equity in it, as opposed to owning a property that's leveraged 70%, that because it has such a high cost basis to it, and it's a higher end property, it doesn't actually cash flow. I think that's a riskier position to be in than the property that's leveraged 100%. So we have several properties that are leveraged 100% because we were able to take out an 80% DSCR loan, which is an investment grade loan that anyone pretty much can get as long as you're buying a property that cash flows. And then we use private money for the other 20% in the down payment and the furnishing cost. So we have $0 of our own money into it. So it's infinite cash on cash returns. And at the same time, it still cash flows several $1,000s because we bought a really low cost multi-unit property. And the final lesson is that if you are going to grow and have a high level of success, you have to lean into other people who are experts at what they do and recognize the fact that you're probably not the best at any individual task within your business. So if you can find the person who's the best in those tasks, that's when you can really elevate your success and elevate your business. I know how to clean our short-term rentals. I could do that myself, but it's not going to be nearly as good as somebody who that's their role, that's their job. job. That's their business, is they clean. They have a system for it. They're really good at it. They do it a lot. I could do handyman tasks. I could figure out pretty much anything. It's going to take me way longer than our handyman. So there's different tasks and different roles that you can do all of them. And in the beginning, you might have to do all of them. But the sooner you start to realize that you can plug individuals into it, and you're actually doing them a huge service by employing them and giving them a role that they're really good at, that they like doing, that you probably don't even like doing yourself. And that's what's going to help you elevate your business to the next level. So hey, hopefully these tips were really helpful for you. And if you're interested in investing in a short-term rental of your own, I work with people personally to walk them through the entire process of how to identify the right market, how to find the right deal, how to line up the financing, all the systems and tools that are required. It's all included. So if you're interested in that, you can set up a call with me at the link that just popped up. It's livingoffrentals.com/call, and we can talk through your goals and see if the program's a good fit. Thanks for joining me for this video. God bless, and I'll see you in the next video.